In the second section of this chapter, we're looking at frequency tables, histograms, and frequency polygons. So given this set of data, a Macintosh apple orchard has 40 trees with these heights in given meters. What we're going to do is complete the frequency table first, and that will allow us to draw a histogram and a frequency polygon. The histogram is really going to be a graph of the frequency distribution. So when we write this frequency table, here I've actually started the table. What we create is an interval of the heights. So it's always going to be an interval, and the interval is going to go up by the same amount every time. So here I started at 1, and I'm going to go to 1.3. So each time my interval is going to increase by 0.3 meters. So my next interval starts where I ended off in the first interval at 1.3, and it'll go to 1.6. My next interval after that will start where I ended, 1.6, and will go to 1.9. Again, I'll start where I ended at 1.9, and this will go to 2.2, and this will continue 2.2 to 2.5, 2.5 to 2.8, 2.8 to 3.1, and 3.1 to 3.4. And if we look at the data set, I don't think there's any number above 3.4. So this will contain all of our data. Now what we do when we figure out the frequency, and again I've started this as well, we're going to look at these numbers and we're going to see how often a number occurs between 1 and 1.3. Now, some people have certain rules about where this interval starts and where it ends. In this case, I'm not going to include the first number in this data set. This number will be included in the previous one. So for instance, I've got a 1.3 here and a 1.3 here. I'm going to put all the measures of 1.3 meters in this interval. And then really I'm going to start with 1.4 in this interval. So if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 numbers that fall between 1.1 and 1.3. Now if I look at this second interval, I'm looking at the numbers from that already are included. I'm not going to include the 1.3, so really it's the 1.4s to the 1.6 meters in height. And if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. For 1.6 to 1.9, remember we are not including 1.6. That was included in the previous interval. So we're looking at 1.7, 1.8, and 1.9, which is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these. Now if we continue with this set of data, we're going to find there's 8 in this interval, 8 in this interval, 6 in this interval, 2 in this one, and 2 in this one. And I'll save you the time from watching me do all that. Now I may have made a mistake, but when you count, when you add these numbers up in this column, the frequency of numbers occurring, it should be the same as the total. And if you add these, the total number of numbers from the frequency table here is also 40, which matches the number of trees we have. Now when we go to graph this, the height is going to be on our x-axis and the frequency will be on our y. So if I turn this for a second, my frequency is going to go here, and I should label this. And this is the height of the trees in meters. Now you should always start at 0. The frequency will be a little easier because it goes up to 8, so we can probably count by ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I can even go a little bit above that. And then for the x-axis here, or the horizontal axis, I'm not going up by ones each time. So I'm going up by 0.3 each time. So I'm going to draw a little compression here. It's like a squiggly line in a sense to say that my graph is compressed up to this point. And then I'm going to start at 1. So this will be my first point, 1. And then my second is going to go to the beginning of the next interval, so 1.3. And then it's going to go to the beginning of the next interval, which is 1.6, 1.9, 2.2, 2.5, 2.8, and 3.1. And if we kept this going, we could, but I'll leave it as this for right now. So what we do in terms of drawing a histogram, so a histogram is going to have, is like a bar graph, except the bars are side by side. So my first interval had a frequency of 4. So from 1.0 to 1.3, there was a frequency of 4. So we draw a bar from these. And if you want, you could shade this. You don't have to. The next interval begins at 1.3 and goes to 1.6. This was also 4. And then the next one was a frequency of 6, so the bar should go up to 6. And then the next two were 8, so I'm going to start and then from 2.5 to 2.8 was an interval of 6. Oh, these ones I didn't go up all the way to 8. So let me just fix that. So then 6. And then the last two intervals from 2.8 to 3.1 and 3.1 to 3.4 were both 2. Now this is what's referred to as a histogram. So it demonstrates the frequency distribution. All right, we see how the numbers are distributed and we see the frequency of how these numbers are distributed. The difference with a frequency polygon is this. Instead of drawing the bars, at the point for this interval here, 1.0 to 1.3, instead of drawing a bar to represent this, we would go to the center of this interval and we would go all the way up to the frequency of 4 and we would put a dot there, halfway between this interval. And the next interval we would do the same. Halfway in between this, we would go to where the frequency is and we put a dot. Now you're going to see, if you drew a histogram, these dots are going to be at the top of each bar, halfway in between them. All right, and between 1.9 and 2.2, halfway is along here, and this went up to 8. The frequency here was 8. So I'm just going to draw these dots. If I was drawing just the frequency polygon, I wouldn't have these here, but again, you would look at halfway in between the interval and you would put a dot as high as the frequency goes. Now what we do to draw this frequency polygon is we're going to connect all of these dots and then we're going to connect them to the bottom of the axis as well. So what we would really do if we were drawing a frequency polygon is we would connect these two dots together from the first and the second interval. We would connect them with a straight edge as well from this interval to this next interval. And we'd continue to connect all of these. And we would also connect the first interval with halfway in between the bottom of the axis on the very next section or bar. So we would actually connect here as well with a frequency polygon. And in here we would connect to this dot, and then this would connect to the horizontal axis right here. So our frequency polygon would look a little bit different. It would look like this. All right, I know it's not as easy to see when it's on the histogram, but a frequency polygon, the histogram would actually not be here. We would just be looking at this line. So this is how you draw a histogram as well as a frequency polygon.